Guess exactly how much money I have down to the cent, and I will give you everything." Those were the words spoken by a man who believed nothing in this world could surprise him anymore. Fear not loss, not God. In a glass tower overlooking Manhattan, a billionaire made a joke he thought was harmless, a challenge meant to humiliate a stranger. But what followed was not a joke. It was a number no human should know, a truth buried for 15 years, and a choice that would decide not just a fortune, but an eternal soul. Before we continue, take a moment and tell us. Where are you watching from, and what time is it right now where you are? Leave your city and time in the comments. And if stories of faith, consequence, and redemption matter to you, subscribe to Heaven Walks with Us, because the story you're about to hear will stay with you long after it ends. Now, prepare your heart. Victor Dunning had never known fear. At 47 years old, fear had become something theoretical, a word used by people without leverage. Victor didn't just make money. He moved markets. From the 42nd floor of a glass and steel tower in Midtown Manhattan, his penthouse office looked out over a city that pulsed with ambition. Yellow taxis crawled like insects below. The Hudson shimmered in the distance. Helicopters cut slow arcs through the sky. To Victor, it all looked like a board game. A very expensive one. On one wall, 6 ultra-high-definition screens displayed live feeds from global markets. New York, London, Frankfurt, Singapore, Hong Kong. Candlestick charts flickered in green and red. Numbers updated every second, billions shifting with each blink. Victor sat back in his Italian leather chair, the kind that cost more than most people's annual salary, his fingers loosely interlaced over his stomach. According to the most conservative estimates, Victor Dunning controlled just under $1 billion. But the truth was more complicated. He had 40+ accounts spread across more than 20 countries. Private equity, offshore trusts, derivatives that recalculated value every second, crypto holdings across multiple blockchains, real estate valued daily by algorithmic models. Even Victor himself could say exactly how much he had at any given moment. And that made him smile, because uncertainty was power. Money, for Victor, was no longer about comfort or security. He had passed that point years ago. It wasn't even about ambition. It was a game. And he had been winning for 15 straight years. Around the polished conference table sat the people who made that possible. 6 advisors. 6 professionals who understood how to bend systems without technically breaking them. There was Mark Reynolds, his chief financial officer, thin, precise, glasses always perched low on his nose. Elaine Porter, a tax strategist who spoke calmly about offshore structures as if discussing weather patterns. Twin brothers Ivan and Eric Cole, compliance engineers who knew how to stay just inside the law's blind spots. And Daniel Price and Laura Mitchell, corporate attorneys who had made lawsuits disappear like smoke. "Transfer to the Cayman vehicle is complete," Mark said, glancing at his tablet. 18 million secured. Victor barely looked up. 18 million. 25 million. 40 million. The numbers had lost emotional weight long ago. "Anything else?" Victor asked casually. Elaine hesitated. "There is a situation downstairs," she said. Security flagged it as unusual. Victor raised an eyebrow. "Unusual how?" "There's a man in the lobby," she continued. "Claims he's an accountant. Says he has information about irregularities in your finances." The room erupted in restrained laughter. Daniel nearly choked on his coffee. "How many extortion attempts is that this year?" one of the twins asked. 17. 18, another replied. Elaine nodded. Normally security would have removed him. But he isn't asking for money. He isn't threatening anything. He just keeps asking for 5 minutes with you. Victor finally looked up. "And there's something different about him," Elaine said quietly. He's too calm. Victor's lips curved into a familiar smile, one his employees recognized instantly. The predator's smile. "Well," Victor said, rising slowly from his chair, straightening his tailored suit. "Let him up." The advisors exchanged glances. Victor Mark began. "We could all use some entertainment," Victor interrupted. "It's been months since I've laughed properly." He turned toward the floor, to ceiling windows, gazing out at the city that moved at his command. "After all," he added softly, "what's the worst that could happen?" 10 minutes later, the elevator doors opened, and a man stepped into Victor Dunning's office, who didn't look like anyone Victor had ever destroyed before. The man didn't speak when he entered. He didn't rush, didn't look around in awe, didn't hesitate at the threshold the way people usually did when stepping into Victor Dunning's world. He simply walked in calm, measured, as if he had been there before. Victor noticed the details immediately. White cotton shirt, simple trousers, worn leather sandals that looked out of place against imported marble floors. No briefcase of polished leather, no phone in his hand. Just a small, faded fabric satchel hanging from his shoulder. But what unsettled Victor wasn't the clothing. It was the man's expression. No fear, no calculation, no desperation. Just a quiet composure that didn't belong in a room built on power and intimidation. The 6 advisors studied him like predators assessing unfamiliar prey. Mark Reynolds narrowed his eyes. Elaine Porter folded her arms. The Cole twins leaned back slightly, instinctively defensive. Daniel and Laura exchanged a quick glance, the kind lawyers share when something doesn't fit the script. The man stopped at the center of the room. He didn't ask where to stand. He simply stood. "Good afternoon, Victor," he said. His voice was warm, steady, not submissive, not aggressive. Victor felt a flicker of irritation. "It's Mr. Dunning," he corrected, though the correction came out softer than he intended. The man nodded, unoffended. "If you prefer." Victor laughed and gestured broadly at the room. "So," he said, "you're the accountant who came to explain my own finances to me." A few advisors smiled thinly. "This should be good," Victor continued. "Go on, enlighten us." The man didn't respond immediately. Instead, he looked around the room, not at the screens, not at the artwork, not at the view, but at the people. One by as if weighing them. Something about the way his eyes lingered made Laura Mitchell feel a chill run up her spine. She shifted in her seat. "I didn't come to expose you," the man said finally. "I came to offer you an opportunity." That earned real laughter. "An opportunity," Daniel repeated. "That's a new one." Victor waved a dismissive hand. "Look," he said, "I don't know who sent you or what fantasy you're reliving in, but if this is about money—" "It isn't," the man interrupted gently. The interruption was subtle, but it landed like a dropped glass. Victor straightened slightly. People didn't interrupt him. "Then what exactly is it about?" Victor asked. The man's eyes met his. "It's about who you became," he said, "and what it cost." Mark leaned toward Victor and whispered, "Security." Victor raised a hand without looking away. "No," he said. "Let him talk." He leaned back in his chair again, crossing his arms. "This is getting interesting." The man reached into his satchel and removed a thin folder. It wasn't thick. No dramatic stack of papers. Just a few pages. He placed it gently on the table in front of Victor. "These are records of systematic tax evasion," the man said calmly. 15 years. 47 accounts. 23 countries. The room went quiet. Victor chuckled. "You just described half of Wall Street." $284 million in unpaid taxes, the man continued. "And one crime that started all of it." Victor's smile tightened. "Careful," he said. "You're recrossing into defamation." "I'm not accusing," the man replied. "I'm stating." One of the Cole twins leaned forward. You don't have access to this information. I didn't buy it, the man said. Mark felt his stomach knot. Victor stood up. Let me guess, he said, towering over the stranger. You think you know how much money I have? The man met his gaze without blinking. I do. The room froze. Victor laughed loudly, the sound echoing off glass and steel. That's impressive confidence, he said. Even my own team can give me that number without hours of consolidation. I know it exactly, the man said. Victor felt something unfamiliar stir in his chest. Annoyance or discomfort. You know what? Victor said suddenly, an idea forming. Let's make this fun. He turned toward the intercom. Record everything from this moment forward, he instructed. Audio and video. Multiple angles. Yes, sir, the assistant replied. Phones came out. Laptops tilted. Cameras rolled. Victor spread his arms theatrically. Here's my offer, he said. If you can tell me exactly how much money I have right now down to the cent. He smiled. I will give you everything. The man looked at him steadily. Are you sure you want to do this, Victor? Victor's smile widened. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. And in that moment, surrounded by screens, lawyers, and billions of dollars, Victor Dunning unknowingly stepped into the most dangerous agreement he had ever made. For a brief moment, no one spoke. Phones were recording. Laptops were open. Security cameras blinked silently from their corners. Victor Dunning stood with his arms slightly spread, like a host presenting a game he knew he couldn't lose. The man in white did not move. He didn't smile, didn't hesitate, didn't ask for clarification. Instead, he looked at Victor with something that unsettled him deeply. Not fear, not admiration. Pity. You're certain, the man said quietly, that you want the truth recorded. Victor scoffed. Absolutely. I want evidence. When you fail. The man nodded once. Then listened carefully. He closed his eyes. Not dramatically. Not as if summoning anything. It looked more like listening. The room seemed to grow quieter. The hum of the air conditioning became noticeable. The faint sound of traffic 40 stories below drifted upward. Someone's phone vibrated softly, then stopped. Seconds passed. Victor shifted his weight. This is the part where you stall? He asked. The man opened his eyes. And when he did, something changed. Mark Reynolds would later say it felt like pressure in his ears the way it does before a storm. Right now, the man said, his voice clear and steady. It is 12:40, 2:19 in the afternoon. Victor instinctively glanced at his watch. So did everyone else. 49 p.m. Exactly. A ripple of unease moved through the room. Coincidence, Victor said quickly. Go on. The man didn't react. At this precise moment, he continued. Your total net worth, including liquid assets, real-time market positions, offshore holdings, and property valuations at current market price is. He paused, not for effect, but as if waiting for the number to finish arriving. Victor felt his pulse quicken. $947,382,649.73. The words landed without drama. No raised voice. No emphasis. Just a number. The room froze. Mark's tablet slipped from his hands and hit the table with a dull sound. Elaine's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. One of the Cole twins whispered, That's absurd. Victor laughed too loudly. That's impressive specificity, he said. But anyone can say a number. He turned sharply toward his team. Check it, Mark swallowed. Sir, consolidating that in real time. I don't care if it takes hours, Victor snapped. I want the number. The advisors sprang into motion. Keyboards clicked. Phone rang. Secure lines opened to banks in Switzerland, the Cayman Islands, Singapore. Mark's fingers shook as he pulled data feeds. Elaine rechecked offshore structures. The Cole twins cross, referenced transactions still processing. The man in white remained still, hands loosely folded, breathing slow, calm. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Victor paced now, glancing repeatedly at the screens. "Status," he demanded. Mark did look up. "Still consolidating," he said. "But this is strange." "What?" Victor barked. "Transactions are updating," Mark said, "including one that processed seconds ago." Elaine stared at her screen. "That commission from Hong Kong," she murmured. "We didn't even anticipate it." 15 minutes. 20. The room felt tighter with every second. Finally, Mark lifted his head. His face had gone pale. "Victor," he said quietly. Victor stopped pacing. "Well," Mark hesitated, then spoke. "The consolidated total is $947,382,649. He paused. Elaine closed her eyes. "And 73 cents. No one breathed. Victor felt as if the floor had tilted beneath him. "That's not possible," he whispered. "It is," Elaine said, her voice shaking. "Down to the cent, including a transaction that cleared 16 seconds after he spoke." Victor turned slowly toward the man in white. For the first time since he had entered the room, Victor Dunning felt fear. "Who are you?" Victor asked. The man's eyes softened. "I know how much you have," he said. "I know how you got it." He stepped forward. "And I know what it cost." Victor didn't sit down. He couldn't. The number was still echoing in his head, not just the amount, but the precision, the timing, the impossibility of it. He took a slow step back toward his desk, steadying himself with one hand against the polished wood. "You got lucky," Victor said finally. "That's all this is. An elaborate guess." The man in white didn't argue. Luck didn't need defending. Instead, he reached into his satchel again. This time he removed a single sheet of paper. One page. He placed it gently on the desk, sliding it toward Victor. "Do you remember July 18th, the man asked, 15 years ago. Victor's jaw tightened. "I don't keep a diary of every day of my life." "You should remember this one," the man said. "It was the day you stopped being poor." The room seemed to lean inward. Mark Reynolds felt his heart begin to pound. Elaine's fingers curled slowly into fists. Victor glanced down at the paper. At first, he saw only numbers, then dates, then account identifiers. His breath caught. That's publicly accessible information," Victor said quickly. "Anyone with enough time could." "Junior accountant," the man continued calmly. $32,000 a year. Small manufacturing firm. Northern New Jersey. Victor looked up sharply. "That's irrelevant." "You lived in a 2-bedroom apartment," the man said. "Second floor. No elevator. You took the bus to work because you didn't own a car." Daniel Price frowned. "That's not in any public filing," he muttered. Victor felt heat rising in his chest. "Enough," he snapped. "This is character assassination." The man did not raise his voice. "On July 18th, he said, you transferred $500,000. Silence. "From the Employee Retirement Fund," he continued, "into an offshore account registered under a shell corporation you created 2 days earlier." Elaine inhaled sharply. "That's impossible," Victor said, though the word came out weak. The man tilted his head slightly. "Count number 77292, he said. Traction code text 498017. Processed at 10:46 am. Victor stared at him. Mark slowly turned his laptop so Victor could see the screen. The data was there. Victor felt his legs weaken. "That money," the man said softly, "belonged to 230 people." Victor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "They worked decades," the man continued. "They trusted the system. They trusted you." Laura Mitchell felt tears sting her eyes. "You falsified records," the man said. "You bribed an external auditor to redirect blame." Victor shook his head violently. "No, that's not." "The owner of the company," the man went on, "was blamed. An honest man. 68 years old. Victor turned away, breathing hard. "That's enough," he whispered. "He died 2 years later," the man said, believing the world thought he was a thief. Victor slammed his hand against the desk. "Stop!" The man fell silent. Not because he was intimidated, but because Victor needed the space to hear himself breaking. The advisors didn't move. They could. The man in white stepped closer. "Every dollar you have now," he said, "can be traced back to that first theft." Victor swallowed. "You didn't just steal money," the man said. "You stole time, health, dignity." Victor felt something tear loose inside his chest. "How do you know all this?" he whispered. The man looked at him not with accusation, but sorrow. "Because I was there," he said. Victor's head snapped up. That day, that choice. That moment when you decided success mattered more than integrity. The room was so quiet Victor could hear his own heartbeat. The man in white straightened. "You asked me who I am," he said. "But the better question is," he met Victor's eyes, "who did you become?" Victor's hands were trembling now, not slightly, not subtly. They shook the way hands do when the body realizes the mind can no longer protect it. "You were lying," Victor said, but the words sounded hollow even to him. "You were just reciting a story, a theory." The man in white didn't argue. Instead, he reached into his satchel one more time. This time, he didn't pull out numbers. He pulled out names. A single page, typed neatly. 230 lines. He placed it on the desk between them. "These," he said softly, "are the people you never counted." Victor stared at the paper without touching it. Mark Reynolds leaned forward despite himself. Elaine Porter covered her mouth. The first name on the list was Margaret Lewis, age 71. She worked 34 years on an assembly line, the man said. Saved a little from every paycheck. She skipped vacations. Walked to work in winter to save on bus fare. Victor swallowed hard. When her pension disappeared, the man continued. She moved in with her daughter. When her daughter lost her job, Margaret became a burden. Victor shook his head. "No, she died in a basement apartment," the man said calmly. "No heat, no savings. Her last winter." The room felt smaller. The man's finger moved down the page. "Thomas Reed, age 69. He was diabetic," the man said. "Insulin cost money. Pensions help pay for medicine." Victor closed his eyes. When the money was gone, the man continued. He rationed his medication, lost his foot, then his leg. Victor's breath became shallow. "He died of infection," the man said, "in a public hospital hallway." "Stop," Victor whispered. The man paused. "Not out of mercy, out of precision. 12 of these names," he said, tapping the paper lightly, "did not survive the consequences of your decision." The advisors looked at one another in stunned silence. Laura Mitchell's eyes filled with tears. "You don't remember them," the man continued. "You never knew their names. To you, it was a transaction." Victor bent forward, gripping the edge of the desk. "I didn't want them to die," he said hoarsely. "What did you think would happen?" the man asked gently. "When you stole the only safety they had left." Victor couldn't answer. The man leaned closer. "For you, it was $500,000, he said. "For them, it was everything." He pointed again to the list. 218 survived, he said. "But survival is not the same as living." Victor's shoulders slumped. They worked into their 70s, their 80s. Some lost their homes. Some lost families. Some lost hope. The man straightened. "And every time you watched your numbers grow," he said. "They watched their lives shrink." Victor pressed his palms against his eyes. "I did to know," he whispered. The man's voice softened, but only slightly. "You didn't want to know." Silence filled the room again. Then Victor looked up. His voice broke. "How do you know how they died?" he asked. "Their last moments. Their last words." The man in white held his gaze. Because I was there, he said. Victor felt a chill crawl up his spine. With every one of them, the man continued. When they were cold. When they were afraid. When they were alone. Victor's lips trembled. And do you know what they asked? The man said quietly. Victor shook his head. They asked why, the man said. Why the man they trusted took everything. Victor collapsed into his chair. For the first time in 15 years, the cost of his fortune had a weight, and it was crushing him. Victor sat motionless. The list of names lay untouched on his desk, like a weight pressing down on the air itself. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The man in white was the one who broke the silence. 15 years ago, he said quietly. You were poorer than you have ever been. Victor let out a bitter laugh. That's supposed to comfort me. It should frighten you, the man replied. Victor looked up slowly. You lived in a small apartment, the man continued. You worried about rent. You counted grocery money. You wondered if you were smart enough to matter. Victor's jaw clenched. But you slept, the man said. You slept through the night. The words struck harder than any accusation. You didn't wake up sweating, the man went on. You didn't replay conversations. You didn't fear exposure. Mark Reynolds felt something twist in his chest. Victor swallowed. At that time, the man said. You were richer than you are now. That's absurd, Victor snapped weakly. I have nearly $1 billion. The man nodded. And not a moment of peace. Victor turned away, staring out the window at the city. I built something, he said. I sacrificed. I worked harder than anyone. You compromised first, the man replied. And then you learned to call it work. Victor's reflection stared back at him in the glass, a man in a tailored suit, eyes bloodshot, face lined by years of tension. You told yourself it was temporary, the man continued. Just one decision, just one shortcut. Victor closed his eyes. And when nothing happened, the man said, when the world didn't collapse, you learned the most dangerous lesson of all. Victor whispered it before the man could finish. That I could get away with it. The man nodded slowly. So you did again, he said. And again. Victor's shoulders sagged. Until numbers became easier than names, the man said. Until balance sheets mattered more than breathing people. Victor rubbed his temples. I didn't feel anything anymore, he admitted quietly. It was just numbers. That was the cost, the man said. Not the money. Victor looked up. The cost was that you stopped feeling, the man said. And when a man stops feeling, he stops being human. The advisors remained frozen. No one argued. Because the words were too accurate. Victor laughed softly, a sound without humor. So what now? He asked. You came to humiliate me. To destroy me. The man shook his head. No, he took a step closer. I came because you are not beyond return, he said. Victor stiffened. There is still a way, the man continued. But it will cost you more than money. Victor's heart began to pound again. You will not like it, the man said. It will undo everything you built. Victor stared at him. And if I refuse? He asked. The man's expression did not change. Then you will keep everything, he said, and lose the only thing you cannot replace. Victor felt something tighten in his chest. For 15 years, the man said softly. You have been running from this moment. He gestured to the list of names. And now, he said, you have reached it. Victor's voice was barely audible. What are you offering me? The man in white held his gaze. A chance, he said. Not forgiveness. Not escape. Just a chance to do what you should have done 15 years ago. Victor's breath caught. Because somewhere deep inside him, beneath the arrogance, beneath the fear, beneath the fortune, he knew exactly what that would require. Victor stood up slowly. The room felt heavier now, as if the air itself resisted movement. A chance, he repeated. You keep saying that word. The man in white nodded. Because it's the only thing that still belongs to you. Victor let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You already proved you know everything, he said. My account. My sins. He gestured toward the list of names on the desk. So tell me, Victor said, his voice sharpening. What exactly do you want from me? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward the window and looked out at the city. The sun reflected off glass towers. Traffic pulsed below like blood through veins. Millions of lives moved forward, unaware that a decision was being weighed 42 floors above them. You have spent 15 years taking, the man said quietly. Always upward, always inward. Victor crossed his arms defensively. That's how the world works. The man turned back to him. No, he said. That's how you chose to make it work. Victor's jaw tightened. If this is about giving money away, he said, write a number. I will donate it. Hospital, foundations, whatever looks good. The man shook his head. This isn't about looking good. The Victor felt irritation rise. Then what is it about? The man stepped closer. It's about returning what never belonged to you, he said. The words landed slowly. Victor opened his mouth to argue, then stopped. He already knew where this was going. You don't get to decide the terms, the man continued. Not this time. Mark Reynolds shifted uneasily. Elaine stared at the floor. You built your empire, the man said, on a theft no one ever corrected. Victor's voice dropped. So you want restitution? Yes, Victor exhaled sharply. That's impossible, he said. You can undo 15 years of damage. You can begin, the man replied. Victor laughed louder now, defensive. You re-asking me to dismantle everything, he said. My reputation, my power, my future. The man nodded. Yes, the room fell silent again. Victor paced, running a hand through his hair. You know what happens if I do that, he said. I become nothing. The man watched him carefully. You become honest. Victor stopped pacing. That's the same thing, he said bitterly. The man's voice softened. No, he said. It only feels that way to someone who built their identity on what they owned. Victor stared at him. And if I say no? He asked. The man didn't threaten him. Didn't he raise his voice? He simply said. Then you keep everything you fought for. Victor waited. And you will finally understand, the man said. That wealth can buy silence but never peace. Victor felt a familiar voice stir inside him. The voice that had guided him for years. You earned this. You survived. Don't let anyone take it. The man stepped back, giving Victor space. I am not here to force you, he said. That choice would mean nothing. Victor looked at the list again. 230 names. He swallowed. If I agree, he asked quietly. Does this end? The man met his eyes. No, he said honestly. But it begins. Victor closed his eyes. For the first time in 15 years, the path forward wasn't about winning. It was about letting go. And that terrified him more than losing everything ever had. Victor was about to speak when he noticed something. The man's hands. They had been folded calmly in front of him the entire time, steady, relaxed, unmoving. But now, as the light from the windows shifted with the passing clouds, Victor saw them more clearly. There were marks. Not cuts, not scars from work or accident. They were old, deep, perfectly circular. Victor frowned. What happened to your hands? He asked. The man looked down as if noticing them for the first time. Then, without a word, he turned his palms upward. The room seemed to exhale all at once. The scars were unmistakable. Not jagged, not random. They looked like wounds that had been driven through, not sliced across. Laura Mitchell gasped softly. One of the Cole twins stepped back, his heel bumping against the wall. Mark Reynolds felt his knees weaken. Victor stared, unable to look away. That's not possible, he whispered. The man lifted his eyes. I carry them, he said quietly. Because I chose to. Victor's heart began to race. You re-saying he started, then stopped. Saying it out loud felt dangerous. The man did finish the sentence for him. He didn't need to. You've spent 15 years believing consequences were something you could avoid, the man said. That someone else would always pay. Victor's throat tightened. These marks, the man continued, are the cost of forgiveness. Victor shook his head slowly. He said, that does make sense. The man stepped closer. Forgiveness is never free, he said. It is only free to the one receiving it. Victor felt his chest tighten painfully. You know the truth now, the man said. You know the damage. The lie. The cost. Victor swallowed. So what? He asked. You forgive me and everything disappears. The man's eyes were gentle but firm. No, Victor looked confused. Forgiveness doesn't erase consequences, the man said. It redeems the one willing to face them. The advisors stood frozen. No one interrupted. This is why I came, the man said. Not to accuse you. Not to destroy you. Victor's voice trembled. Then why show me this? The man raised his hands again, the scars visible. Because you need to understand, he said. That mercy is real. Victor's breath hitched. And so is justice. The words landed with equal weight. I am offering you a way through, the man said. Not around. Victor leaned back against his desk, struggling to breathe evenly. You expect me to believe you? He stopped himself again. The man nodded once. 2,000 years ago, he said softly. I asked a question. Victor felt a chill move through his body. What good is it, the man continued, for someone to gain the whole world and lose their soul? The room was silent. Victor's mind raced. This couldn't be real. And yet, nothing about this day had followed the rules of what he thought was real. If I do what you're re-asking, Victor said slowly, you re-saying I can still be forgiven? Yes, the man replied without hesitation. And if I don't? Victor asked. The man didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice carried no anger. Then you will still be loved, he said. But you will have chosen to stand alone with what you've built. Victor looked at the scars again. They were not threatening. They were grieving. And for the first time since the man had entered the room, Victor understood something that terrified him more than judgment ever could. This offer wasn't cheap, and it wouldn't be repeated forever. Victor stared at the scars for a long moment. Then he looked away. How much? He asked. The question came out flat, stripped of emotion, the way he used to ask about deals worth hundreds of millions. The man in white studied him carefully. You already know, he said. Victor shook his head. No, he replied. I don't, not this time. The man stepped back toward the conference table. You promised, he said calmly. If I told you exactly how much you had, you would give everything. Victor felt his chest tighten. That was a challenge, he said quickly. A provocation. It was a vow, the man replied. Spoken, recorded, witnessed. Daniel Price swallowed hard. He's right, Daniel said quietly. From a legal standpoint. You made a binding offer. Victor shot him a glare. Not now. The man in white raised a hand gently. I didn't come to take your money, he said. I don't need it. Victor let out a breath. Then what do you want? The man looked at the list of names still lying on the desk. I want you to return what you stole, he said. Not symbolically. Not partially. Victor's jaw clenched. How much? He asked again. The man didn't hesitate this time. $900 million. The words landed heavily. Elaine gasped. Mark's eyes widened. One of the Cole twins whispered, That's almost everything. Victor laughed a sharp, incredulous sound. That leaves me with what? He demanded. 47 million, the man replied. Enough to live. Enough to work honestly. Enough to rebuild. Victor shook his head violently. You asking me to destroy myself? No, the man said. I'm asking you to stop destroying others. The victor turned away, pacing. 900 million, he muttered. That's my entire life. The man's voice remained steady. It was their entire lives, too. Victor stopped pacing. And what happens to the money? He asked. $420,000, the man said. To each of the 218 survivors. Victor did the math instinctively. And the rest? To the families of the 12 who died, the man replied. So that what was taken from them does not remain stolen forever. Victor felt dizzy. You think money fixes that? He snapped. No, the man said softly. But restitution begins healing. Victor leaned on the desk, breathing hard. And if I do this, he asked, what do I get? The man met his eyes. You get peace, he said. You get the ability to sleep without fear. You get forgiveness. Victor laughed bitterly. You offering me something I can measure? Yes, the man replied. Because the things that matter most never fit on a balance sheet. Victor looked around the room, at the screens, the advisors, the city below. He imagined life without private jets, without power, without being feared. The voice inside him began to whisper again. You earned this. You're smarter than them. Don't give it away. Victor's hands clenched into fists. I need time, he said. The man shook his head. No, he said gently. You need courage. Victor's eyes filled with tears he hadn't expected. You don't understand what you're asking. The man stepped closer. I understand exactly, he said. I watched you choose once before. Victor's breath caught. And I am watching you now. The room held its breath. Because everyone knew. Whatever Victor said next would define the rest of his life. Victor's shoulders sagged. For the first time since the man in white had entered the room, the fight seemed to drain out of him. He looked older suddenly. Smaller. 900 million, he whispered again, as if repeating the number might change its meaning. He turned slowly toward the man. If I do this, Victor said, his voice unsteady. If I give it back, will it stop? The man did not hesitate. It will begin, he said. But it will no longer destroy you. Victor closed his eyes. Images rushed through his mind. The list of names. The number spoken down to the cent. He thought of the nights he woke up drenched in sweat. The constant calculations. The fear that never fully left him. He exhaled deeply. All right, Victor said quietly. Every head in the room snapped toward him. I will do it. Elaine let out a sharp breath. Mark's eyes widened. Laura pressed a hand to her mouth. Victor straightened as if bracing himself. I will transfer the money, he said. All of it. 900 million. The man in white nodded. You are choosing life, he said. Victor swallowed hard. Draft whatever needs to be drafted, Victor said, turning toward his advisors. Trust disbursements. Compensation fund. Mark hesitated. Victor, are you sure? Victor nodded slowly. Yes. For a brief moment, just a moment, something like relief touched his face. The man in white watched him carefully. You are doing the right thing, he said. Even now, Victor let out a shaky laugh. I never thought I'd hear that again. He stepped toward the window, looking out at Manhattan. Cars moved below. People hurried along sidewalks. Life went on. I built all of this, Victor said softly, and I am about to erase it. The man said nothing. Victor's reflection stared back at him in the glass. A man in a $10,000 suit. A man who once commanded fear. And behind that reflection, the screen still glowed. 38649. 73, the number pulsed like a heartbeat. Victor, a smile faded. What happens to me afterward? He asked quietly. Who am I without this? The man stepped closer. You become free, he said. Victor nodded slowly. Free, the word sounded foreign. Then something shifted. Victor's eyes drifted back to the screens. To the charts, the accounts, The leverage. His jaw tightened. 47 million. That was what would be left. Enough to live, yes. Enough to matter, maybe not. The familiar voice rose again, stronger now. You survived the hard way. You outsmarted everyone. Why should you end up like everyone else? Victor's breathing quickened. I worked for this, he murmured. The man in white heard him. So did they, he replied gently. Victor shook his head. You don't understand, he said, his voice growing firmer. I sacrificed everything. The man's eyes darkened with sorrow. So did they, he repeated. Victor turned back to the desk. To the contracts waiting to be written. To the advisors watching him. To the number that had defined his life. His hands clenched. What if, Victor began, then stopped. The room leaned in. What if I don't, he said. The man's face fell not in anger, but in pain. Victor, he said quietly, do this. The Victor's chest heaved. The choice that had seemed clear seconds ago now felt unbearable. And in that moment, standing between peace and power, Victor Dunning began to change his mind. Victor's silence stretched. Seconds passed. Then more. The room felt suspended, as if even the city outside had paused to listen. The man in white stood motionless, his eyes fixed on Victor, not commanding, not threatening. Waiting, Victor inhaled sharply. No, he said. The word came out quietly at first. No, he repeated louder now. Elaine gasped. Victor Mark began. Victor raised his hand. I said no. He turned toward the man in white, his eyes hardening. I am not giving away $900 million, he said. I built this. I earned it. The man's shoulders sagged almost imperceptibly. You took it, he said softly. Victor shook his head. That's your interpretation, he snapped. You don't understand what it takes to survive at this level. I understand exactly, the man replied. Victor's voice rose. I worked harder than anyone in this room. I made the right moves. I saw opportunities others didn't. You saw people as numbers, the man said. And that made me successful, Victor shot back. I'm not apologizing for being better. The advisors stared in disbelief. Laura's voice trembled. Victor, please. Victor ignored her. I won, he said. And I'm not handing my victory to ghosts and guilt. The man in white closed his eyes for a long moment. When he opened them, something had changed. The compassion was still there, but now it was joined by gravity. You have chosen, he said. Victor laughed harshly. I choose reality. The man nodded slowly. Then you will receive it. He took a step back. I did not come to condemn you, he said. I came to offer mercy. Victor crossed his arms. And I don't need it. The man's voice lowered. Mercy rejected becomes judgment. The room darkened not from shadows, but from stillness. You were offered life, the man said. And you chose what you already had. Victor clenched his jaw. The man raised his hands one final time. The scars were visible again. I will not force you, he said. Love never does. Then he looked at Victor with a sadness so deep it made Mark look away. Coast what you have sound, the man said. The air seemed to vibrate. Light gathered around the man, not blinding, not theatrical, but undeniable. And then he was gone, not walking away, not fading, simply not there. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then every device in the room chimed at once. Phones vibrated violently. Laptops flashed notifications. Tablets began playing video. Victor turned sharply. What's happening? On the screens appeared his own face. Talking, confessing. Detailing everything. The theft. The bribes. The lies. Victor's blood ran cold. No, he whispered. No. The video multiplied. Emails sending themselves. Secure uploads completing. Press inboxes filling. Mark stared at his screen in horror. It's sending to the yours. Dodge B. Elaine covered her mouth. And the media, Laura whispered. Victor lunged toward his computer, pounding keys. Stop it, shut it down. Nothing responded. The system was no longer listening to him. The final words echoed in his mind, not spoken aloud, but felt. You choke. And for the first time since he had spoken that impossible number, Victor Dunning understood something far worse than loss. He understood finality. The first knock came less than 4 hours later. Victor didn't hear it at first. He was still staring at the screen in front of him, watching his own voice confess crimes he had spent 15 years burying. The second knock was louder. "Federal agents," a voice called out. "Open the door." Elaine burst into tears. Mark stood frozen, his face drained of color. Victor backed away slowly, shaking his head. "No," he muttered. "This isn't happening." The door opened anyway. Men in dark jackets entered the penthouse with practiced efficiency. Badges flashed. Cameras followed close behind, news crews already waiting in the hallway, alerted by a story spreading faster than any press release could. "Victor Dunning," an agent said, reading calmly from a document. "You are under arrest." Victor's instincts kicked in. "My lawyers," he began. "You'll have plenty of time to speak with them," the agent replied, turning him around. Cold metal closed around his wrists. The click echoed louder than anything else in the room. As Victor was led through the marble hallway, cameras captured every step. The billionaire who once moved markets now could move his own hands. Outside, the footage went live. Billionaire confesses to pension fraud. Hedge fund tycoon arrested in Manhattan. Social media exploded. The impossible video, spread everywhere. People watched it on phones, in offices, in homes. They paused, replayed, shared. The moment Victor rejected the offer. The moment he sealed his fate. By morning, the world knew his name. And by afternoon it knew his crimes. Accounts were frozen almost simultaneously. Domestic, offshore. Trusts. Every lever Victor once controlled went dead. The next 48 hours passed in a blur. Courtroom. Flashed. Headline. Victor sat behind glass as charges were read. Fraud, pension theft, bribery, tax evasion. Hundreds of counts. Each one felt like a nail sealing a door. The advisors were called in next. One by one, they were questioned. Mark Reynolds was the first to break. "I didn't know how it started," he said under oath. "But I know what it became." Elaine followed. Then the Cole twins. Then Laura. Each testimony added weight. Each word erased another excuse. Victor watched from his seat as the people who once protected him now chose the truth over loyalty. Not out of revenge. Out of fear and something else they hadn't felt before. Conviction. Months turned into a year. Then, two, the trial consumed everything. Survivors testified. Elderly men and women stood in court, voices shaking, telling stories of lost homes, lost health, lost dignity. Victor couldn't meet their eyes. When the verdict finally came, the courtroom was silent. "Guilty," the judge said, "on all counts." The sentence followed. Decades in federal prison. Total asset seizure. The number was read aloud, the same number that had once defined Victor's power. Now it defined his downfall. As guards led him away, Victor felt something inside him finally collapse. Not anger, not defiance, regret. That night, alone in a concrete cell, Victor lay awake on a thin mattress. No screen, no numbers, no city lights, just silence. And in that silence, one thought returned again and again. He had been offered a way out, and he had said no. Prison strips time of meaning. Days blur together. Weeks collapse into routine. Years pass without ceremony. Victor Dunning learned that quickly. The man who once woke up to panoramic views of Manhattan now woke up to concrete walls and a metal door. 3 steps from bed to sink. 3 steps back. No glass, no screens. No numbers updating in real time. At first, he told himself it was temporary. Appeals would work. Connections would matter. Something would break in his favor. But nothing did. Months became years. The world moved on without him. Occasionally, fragments of news reached the prison. Former employees of the manufacturing plant, now elderly, had received compensation. Some bought small homes. Some paid for medical treatment they had postponed for years. Some simply stopped worrying about whether they would eat next month. Victor listened in silence. Each story landed like a quiet accusation. His health deteriorated faster than he expected. Stress he had ignored for decades caught up with him. Diabetes, heart problems. A body that no longer responded to willpower or wealth. In the quiet of his cell, Victor began repeating something under his breath. Not a prayer. A number. 947,382,649.73. The number the man in white had spoken. The number he had known exactly. Victor whispered it at night. On bad days. On sleepless ones. It followed him like a shadow. Sometimes, in the early hours before dawn, Victor saw hands in his dreams. Scarred hands. Not reaching to punish him. Reaching and waiting. Years later, in a prison infirmary that smelled of disinfectant and despair, Victor felt his chest tighten. He knew what it was. There was no dramatic moment. No crowd, no final speech. Just a man lying on a narrow bed, staring at a cracked ceiling. His breath grew shallow. And for the first time since the day in the penthouse, Victor allowed himself to ask the question he had avoided for decades. "Who were you?" he whispered. But the room was silent. Victor Dunning died alone. No funeral. No legacy in his name. The fortune that once defined him had been redistributed, repurposed, used to restore fragments of dignity to those he had stolen from. His ashes were buried without a marker. The number that ruled his life meant nothing anymore. Years later, his story was still told. In business schools. In ethics seminars. In churches. Not as a tale of success, but as a warning. Because Victor Dunning had been offered something rarer than wealth. He had been offered mercy, and he had rejected it. The question his life leaves behind is not about money. It is about choice. When the moment comes, when truth stands in front of you and asks you to choose between what you own and who you are, what will you choose? If this story has stirred something in your heart, take a moment and reflect. Leave a comment sharing what part stayed with you the most. And if you want to hear more stories like this, stories of faith, consequence, and the quiet moments where eternity is decided, subscribe to Heaven Walks with Us. Because sometimes the most important encounters in life are the ones we never expect. And sometimes we only get one chance to answer them.